Hi, everyone. This is Tony Nash with Complete Intelligence. Thanks for joining us for part 2 of this Will China Invade Taiwan discussion with Albert Marco and Chris Balding. In part 1, we looked at the plausibility of China invading Taiwan and what that might look like. In part 2, we look at a number of things. First of all, is Hong Kong a precedent for China potentially taking over Taiwan? We also look at the global semiconductor industry and firms like TSMC. What kind of impact would Chinese action on Taiwan have toward TSMC? And also, how would we expect the US to react? And what would that do, the different reactions do to US credibility in East Asia? So thanks again for joining us. Thanks to Albert Marco and Chris Balding for spending their time with us on this. It's a very valuable conversation, and we hope you enjoy it.
From some of the people I've talked to, is they say actually they see the military risks increase significantly to Taiwan based upon hardware that's getting onboarded in the PLA and things like that. They see the risks to Taiwan's increase significantly post about 2022. Okay. Yeah, would you share a similar outlook?
Well, so you have to understand, when it comes to like offensive versus defensive capabilities, the defense always has a clear-cut advantage, right? Offensively, it takes $7 per $1 of offensive spending to actually take over. Now, without a doubt, China would win over the long term, but at what cost? What cost is that gonna? What cost will the PLA Navy take? I mean, the Taiwanese defenses are no joke. They're well equipped to at least hold them off for quite a long time. And to invade it, even the PLA officers, that's a social structure. That's a social ladder, realistically. How would it look like? How would it look like for Xi if the firstborn son of some of these elite families are coming home in body bags 18 months from now or 24 months from now? It would not be a good look for him.
So let me ask you a follow-up question. What you're saying about the body bags makes perfect sense. What do you think of the way I phrased it is that's a very logical cost benefit rationale. Is she that directly rational? Because it would seem like there would be a better way to handle Hong Kong than what has taken place.
Okay. Yeah, but Hong Kong was a little financial center with no military, no nothing. I mean, there's just a bunch of woke millennials running around thinking they can hold off the PLA. It's insane. You know what I mean? I mean, like, that doesn't work like that in real life. You got to come at them with guns to earn your freedom. It was encircled by China. It was inevitable.
So I think the difference with Hong Kong is there has, since 97, there hasn't been a question as to whether Hong Kong is China. Hong Kong is China, right? And people have shrugged their shoulders since 97 and said, look, it's China. It's it's a matter of time. It's a special zone.
I think maybe my meaning was lost a little bit. The cost benefit of what she has done in China or in Hong Kong, he clearly probably could have reaped more benefit by saying, we're going to let Hong Kong continue to be Hong Kong for another 10 years or something like that. There wasn't really a necessarily need for him to move. It's probably going to create bigger problems, internationally. There's probably assets that are going to move out of Hong Kong to other places, Singapore, other things. So if we look at a strict cost benefit, there wasn't really a reason for Xi to do that.
There was the protests that would come, first every 5 years, then every 2 years, and so on and so on, it was becoming increasingly embarrassing to Beijing. And, the official channel to, as an inward or outbound investment lane through Hong Kong, it's still there. But Beijing couldn't take the embarrassment of this. And what they didn't want is to have, some rogue police brigade kill a bunch of 25-year-olds on accident or whatever, right? And so I believe they had to pull the trigger. And I think this has been planned and architected over years. And it seems like something sudden that people are like, wait, what's going on? They're, rolling military, and this has been planned for years.
So let me play devil's advocate here. What you're getting at is this was embarrassing domestically. And he basically said, to hell with the consequences internationally. Okay. So if we applied that same basic line of thinking to Taiwan, the question would then become, well, they're willing to deal with the international consequences. We know that, and across a range of areas. Mm-hmm. What are there domestic issues at play here about Taiwan?
I think it's backwards. Sorry, Albert. I'll shut up here, but I think it's backwards. I think it was more embarrassing internationally because the CCP plays international media like a fiddle. Xi Jinping goes into Davos or speaks at a WEF event. Everyone walks away enlightened, and they play international media like a fiddle. So I think they were less worried about what international media would think, and even less worried about what domestic populations would think over time. They just needed to rip the Band-Aid off so that righteous reporters in Hong Kong wouldn't keep raising this story because it's inconvenient. And so they knew that at some point they were going to take over, and so they just did it. It's inevitable that it's going to happen. They just did it. And global media, they've fallen in line over the last 9 months, right? Nobody talks about Hong Kong anymore and the rights and being trampled upon and all that stuff. International media have fallen in line on this. They don't care. They want to make China happy. Why? Because the CCP and their companies are going to buy supplements in their newspapers and in their online forums, and they're going to pay for their think tank pieces and all that stuff.
We won't name specific media outlets that are decidedly less critical of China than they used to be, as an editorial line.
Right. So, Albert, sorry, I didn't mean to step over you on Hong Kong.
No, it's okay. I agree, and I love that analogy of like ripping the Band-Aid off, because although Hong Kong was ripping a Band-Aid off, but Taiwan would be like ripping duct tape off a Greek guy's chest. That's the problem here, and that's what we have to understand. Not only is it economically damaging, it's politically damaging, internationally, militarily. I mean, the risks just, in my opinion, way outweigh the benefits of trying to take over Taiwan.
Okay, so let's
Albert, what you do on your free time is your business, man. Okay,
Hey, man.
Okay,
it's Florida. I gotta look smooth chested,
Okay, so you just did a Florida plug for me. That's excellent. So let's say this happened. Okay, let's say 6-9 months, something happens. Okay, what happens? Say economically, I know there's cross holdings with CCP princes and stuff, but let's look at, say, semiconductors, for example. Okay, TSMC, the other foundries they're disrupted for a period of time. Sorry?
Yeah, I know where you're going with this, and this would actually make me flip my position if I was advising China. If they wanted to hit the West and create even a bigger semiconductor shortage, then you absolutely disrupt
Right.
Taiwan and
This is where I'm going.
You absolutely would do that.
Right. So does it make SMIC relevant, and does it make the Chinese foundries relevant? What is in that gap? As TSMC, all the execs are kind of moving to Phoenix or whatever to that foundry, right? What happens then?
I think honestly, I mean it's funny because I was going to ask you guys directly about TSMC, that exact question, because I mean, that's one of the things. I mean, Taiwan and TSMC are in the very awkward space of, at this point, they're probably like the manufacturing firm. The other places do the design and stuff like that. There's a lot of firms that are in the mid and low end, but when it comes to your high end stuff, it's pretty much TSMC as the manufacturer. And so, I mean, I think you could make a case that Beijing says, screw it. If we can forget about Taiwan, if we can capture TSMC, we've got it all.
They just invade Hsinchu, right?
Yeah.
And Hsinchu moves to Miami.
Yeah. I mean, guys, like the Chinese, for all the negative things that I have to say about them, are really good asymmetrically combating the West, especially the United States, where they've weaponized Caterpillar, weaponized multiple American companies within China to hit the United States politically and economically. That would make perfect sense from the Chinese perspective to just cut off the semiconductors, specifically because those semiconductors go to Apple, to the big three automobile sector, which is the only thing right now that's going to be able to get unemployment back down to a decent level for the Biden administration.
Okay, so let me ask you another question. If that did happen, okay, would that present an opportunity for Japanese and Korean firms to fill that void, to kind of circumvent Chinese control? Or has that ship sailed years ago and there's no way they can recover that?
I don't think that they'd be able to recover it, especially in the near term. I think the chip shortage would be so damaging to the entire global economy, that it would be pretty devastating for a while.
Yeah, and the people I talk to in chips basically say, when it comes to manufacturing of higher end chips, it's basically TSMC. I mean, not even Intel these days is manufacturing their own chips. So even if let's assume, for instance, that TSMC is Chinese tomorrow, it would probably take 5 years before Korean and Japanese firms, at the earliest, I mean, would be producing high-end chips that could compete with TSMC.
Okay, so is that the issue? I mean, democracy is great and all, but is that the issue that if China threatens to invade Taiwan, and the West is like, look, do whatever you want, we just want to make sure we have our chips? Is that a plausible negotiating point, or no?
I don't think the West could even trust China in that respect. I mean, what has the Chinese ever given us assurances and anything like that ever?
Nothing. I think it's
nothing.
45 was the last time that happened. So okay, and then one last question, because I know we've run long here, and I appreciate your time, guys. Okay, again, let's act like this happens. Okay, something happens in June, July, whatever. Okay, what does the U.S. Navy do? Will they protect Taiwan, or will they distance and reevaluate?
Honestly, I think the U.S. would probably let Taiwan defend itself for a certain period of time and float in a carrier strike group just to deter China at some point. I mean, they'd have to walk the fence there. That's not an easy solution. I mean, you're talking about going up against China within proximity to their borders, which they would have an advantage of.
And you have to. And the other thing is you would have to think that if let's assume that it's some type of, not even necessarily they're floating boats across and putting soldiers on the beach. You have to assume if China's doing something like that, it's pretty much moving all their chips to the middle of the table. I mean, they're not going to do something like this, just, launching a couple volleys of missiles low-grade
No,
missiles
no.
into Taipei. This is moving all your chips to the center of the table. And so basically the question that the U.S. Navy would have to ask is, are we going to move all our chips to the middle of the table? Otherwise, let China have it. I mean,
right, but here's the question with that though. Okay, if the U.S. says fine, we're not going to move our chip to the center of the table, let China have it, then does that destroy U.S. credibility in East Asia?
Absolutely.
Because the requirement, the obligation of the U.S. to defend Japan, Korea, and so on, those are gone then, right? Because the U.S. has an obligation to defend Taiwan.
Yeah, absolutely. I would completely agree with you. I think that the South Korea would be the biggest problem immediately after that.
Yeah.
Yep, would be.
And you could also, and two things to add on to this, which piggyback on this, is if you'll notice, one of the first comments about Biden administration foreign policy was the Japanese defense minister saying, China's a real problem. You boys need to get your big boy pants on. Okay.
Right.
And that was what, a month ago or a couple weeks ago or something like that. And that was pretty much, the Japanese saying, you guys, this isn't 2008, boys.
Right.
You've got to be ready. The other thing is over the past couple of years, there's been a shift in the U.S. military, so that basically all the U.S. military in Korea is now way far down the peninsula. Okay, and South Korea knows that. Okay, and so the U.S. military is in a position where if the North Korea decides to stream across the border, they can pretty much pack up their personnel and be gone in a couple of hours. Okay, right. South Korea knows that. Okay, right. So I can guarantee you that if something happens, Tokyo and Seoul are absolutely going to be paranoid.
That
the U.S. doesn't stand right there and start firing back.
Interesting. Big implication, guys. Thanks so much, Albert, Chris. Thanks so much for your time. I hope to do this again soon. We'll find another topic. We'll game it out and talk through it. But this is fantastic. I really appreciate it. For everyone watching, please subscribe to the channel below. Please subscribe to our newsletter below, and we'll keep you updated on all of these events. Thanks very much, guys.
Thanks, Tony.